That's terrifying. What do you have to say about the matter, Hulkster? You could see how playing with toys as a kid was frustrating with one hand. Take your roids, brother. Is that what he said? It's January 1990. And we don't know going into the show, but we're about to set the stage for what will become
the Ultimate Challenge.
Let's go back in time to the 1990 WWF Royal Rumble. I'm your host, independent professional wrestler Gregory Iron, and lifelong wrestling fan. Grew up loving the WWF, and my fandom really began around this time period in 1990. It's an interesting time for the World Wrestling Federation. We're coming off the highs of 1980s professional wrestling. Sports entertainment was at its peak following the mega powers exploding at WrestleMania 5. Success for the WWF would continue throughout the summer and fall of 1989 as we got the release of all-time movie classic No Holds Barred.
Harley and me and you in the tree.
We got that classic feud between Hulk Hogan and Zeus. But could the WWF keep its momentum as we entered the 90s? And could they do it by trying something different? Hulk Hogan had been the most popular superstar for the WWF during the WrestleMania boom. But a newcomer over the past couple years had been on the rise. Intercontinental Champion, the Ultimate Warrior. Could the WWF pull off something that they had never done on pay-per-view? Good guy versus good guy. Well, this was the ultimate test. The 1990 Royal Rumble was the third annual Rumble event, the second on pay-per-view, and only the second to feature 30 men, as the 1988 version that aired on USA Network only featured 20. Right off the bat, I love the video package for this show. It takes me back to my childhood. There's nothing better than Vince McMahon running down the Royal Rumble entrance for the night. The motto, Rick Martel, Superfly, Jimmy Snuka, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Andre the Giant. And it is a little weird when they show the Andre graphic because he does look like he's very much molesting a man.
Anybody want a peanut?
After the video package, we're taken inside the Orlando Arena with over 16,000 people to witness this supercard. Right off the bat, one of the first shots we get of the crowd is a sign that says, "Sensational Sherry's chest is hairy." Back in our day, that was our Twitter, okay? Signs. Signs in the crowd. Ridiculous, stupid, ignorant signs. Your commentators for that night were Jesse the Body Ventura and Tony Schiavone, who apparently found out at the last second that he would be taking the place of Vince McMahon on this show. The Bushwhackers are in action against the fabulous Rougeaus brothers. I kind of forgot that for a second there, Jacques grew out a beard. As an adult, I look back on the Bushwhackers and I think to myself, how could this ever have been an overact? But then I look at the crowd reaction, and the crowd was going apeshit. If I'm being honest, I remember always thinking to myself, gee, I hope my mom and dad take me to a WWF live event so I can sit in the front row and the Bushwhackers can lick my forehead. I had a very traumatizing childhood that I'm not going to go into at this point, okay? So, this actually wasn't the first time that the Rougeaus and the Bushwhackers met on pay-per-view. Are we going to get a repeat of that infamous spot from WrestleMania 5? That's the real question. In this tag match, there's a lot of shenanigans, a lot of ass-biting from the Bushwhackers, and most of the time in this bout, it kind of feels like a WWF house show match. If you've ever been to a house show, you know what I'm talking about. It's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more playful. They're trying stuff out, seeing what works and doesn't work with the crowd. That's not a bad thing. I went into this match with low expectations, and I ended up really, really enjoying it. The styles mesh better together than you would imagine. There's a lot of heat on Luke for a little bit, but at one point, Butch finally gets the hot tag. And honestly, it kind of looks like shit, but Jock, to his credit, makes it look like $1 million just bumping and feeding around for him. At one point, Jimmy Hart, the manager of the Rougeaus brothers, grabs a leg from the outside, and the ref doesn't seem to care at all. In the end, Luke and Butch do their signature battering ram for the victory. I give this match 6 out of 10, which is actually higher than I would have expected to rank it. I found myself laughing out loud at a couple of spots in the match. Keeping my expectations low for this contest, especially with the Bushwhackers involved, I was blown away. And hey, listen, I'll be honest, I've been on shows with Luke the Bushwhacker on several occasions, and one time, this is like a 70-year-old man, I watched him hit an RKO. He took a back bump. Find me 70-year-old WWE Hall of Famers that are willingly taking back bumps on independent shows. I literally have seen Honky Tonk Man take clotheslines and front bump off them. Not saying that's a bad idea. You only got so many bumps on your bump card. A lot of wrestler terminology here. Let's continue with the show. We cut backstage to the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, with his manager at the time and my former manager on a few occasions, Virgil. And the $1 Million Man is hot. Why? The prior year, Ted DiBiase had it set up to where somehow, luckily, he ended up being number 30 in the Rumble. And so, President Jack Tunney got higher security measures for this event. And unfortunately for Ted, he drew number 1. Next match on the card, The Genius versus Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I feel like with podcast and the internet existing, Brutus Beefcake gets a lot of hate. But, much like the Bushwhackers in the first match, Brutus is undeniably over with the crowd. And again, admittedly, I loved Brutus the Barber Beefcake as a kid. With the whole strutting and cutting thing. I mean, everything after Brutus probably wasn't the best, and we could just name like all 14 of his gimmicks if we wanted to. But we won't make you suffer through that. The Genius. Of course, brother of Macho Man Randy Savage. Grossly underrated. Genius hits us with the poem. This too felt like a house show match. But not in a good way. Lots of prancing, lots of flipping. At times the heat kind of drags, and I just feel like it's going on and on and on. At one point, Brutus and Genius do like a weird crotching spot on the rope. Genius powders out of the ring, and as he prances around ringside, we get an uncalled for chant by the crowd. After Brother Brutai teases the sleeper, we unexpectedly get a ref bump, which I didn't see coming in match number 2. Which led to some of the worst dance moves ever seen, followed by some cutting. Mr. Perfect ran down to ringside. After like 10 million years, the ref wakes up and calls for a DQ of some sort. Mr. Perfect grabs a chair and decides he wants to break Brutus's ribs, hitting him a couple times in the stomach. The end result, a double DQ. Lame. Double DQs rarely ever will get a good reaction from me, especially in this case when the match just wasn't great, and I expected more out of the Genius. I mean, he's coming off of a win against Hulk Hogan on Saturday night's main event, which, if you have time to go back and watch that, check that out. I think it's one of Hulk Hogan's best matches ever. If I had to rate this match, I would give it 2 out of 10. Not a fan of this one. I would say definitely skip this match between the Genius and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Sean Mooney is backstage with the Heenan family, consisting of course, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Ravishing Rick Rude Haku, and Andre the Giant. Ravishing Rick is looking jacked. And there seems to be some dissension between the family, and quite frankly, Sean Mooney instigated some of that, trying to question who may do what if it came down to the Heenan family in the Royal Rumble match. And that's, of course, followed by a submission match between rugged Ronnie Garvin and Greg the Hammer Valentine. The feud between Garvin and Valentine had actually been happening since December of 1988. It all started at Madison Square Garden, where Valentine defeated Garvin using tights as a leverage. In the spring of 1989 on Superstars, the two had a retirement match.
Giving Ronnie Garvin the ultimate challenge, a return match.
Yeah, Garvin lost that match, and instead of just leaving the WWF altogether, he came back to torment the Hammer as a referee, and after he was suspended, he came back as an announcer at SummerSlam in 1989. Valentine was so pissed about all this that he got rugged Ronnie Garvin reinstated to the WWF. They fought on opposite teams at the Survivor Series, and now it was time for the big blow-off. Garvin and Valentine, never really known for their promos, but luckily for you, I went back and found the 1990 Royal Rumble Countdown show on YouTube, and I got some comments from both competitors in the match. Garvin was just kind of rambling incoherently to hype the match.
Giving up, telling he's better than I am. I quit. There is no words I can come out of my chest and say I quit.
Greg the Hammer didn't even seem to know his own name.
A lot of people would think this is a lot of pressure, a submission match. What happens if Greg the Hammer Valentine goes down?
Ronnie Garvin, much like the Hammer, is wearing a brace over his ankle. The idea being that Valentine had unfairly been using his brace for a long time to get an advantage when he applies the figure four. So in return, Ronnie Garvin was wearing a brace of his own to counter the figure four if it was attempted. The match itself was unlike many WWF matches of the time. It was just hard-hitting. Several times in this match, both guys go for pinfalls because it's sort of an instinctual situation. You're used to being able to have pinfalls in a pro wrestling match, but this is a submission match. At one point, Greg Valentine seems to get Ronnie Garvin prone and in a position to receive the figure four. However, because of the brace on Ronnie Garvin's ankle, he's able to counter, and he proceeds to make a nana-nana-boo-boo face. After the two men collide at one point, Jimmy Hart decides to remove the brace of Ron Garvin, and instead of trying to be inconspicuous about it, decides to hold it up high and run around the ring with it so the ref can blatantly see it. The ref, you would think, would do something about this, but he doesn't. He just kind of watches this happen. Garvin eventually removes the brace of Greg Valentine. Both men attempt to use the braces. Garvin hits Valentine in front of the ref, who does nothing, applies the sharpshooter, and Greg Valentine submits, allowing Ronnie Garvin to get the victory. I enjoyed the match for the hard-hitting style. If I had to be critical, it was never said that there was no disqualifications in this match. I could see going for pinfall attempts on a couple occasions just because, again, it's a submission stipulation. You're used to pinfalls, but these guys went for pinfalls, it had to be a dozen times, to where it just kind of made them both look idiotic. Using the brace in front of the ref, not a fan of that because of the inconsistencies. I'm going to have to rank it 4 out of 10.
Impressed me.
And then that look of shame inside my eyes.
I thought it was mediocre at best, and maybe a 4 out of 10.
No, I'm not Bret Hart. I give it a 4 out of 10. Again, hard-hitting match, but just, too many inconsistencies for my liking. We cut backstage and Mr. Perfect, who's angry about Brutus the Barber Beefcake getting away with cutting people's hair, but he is very happy that he got the perfect number, 30. We cut to the ring for an episode of the Brother Love Show. This segment is used to set up the intergender match that we would see at WrestleMania 6. For those of us that are not as well read as Brother Love, he proceeds to give us the definition of lady. He introduces us to Sensational Sherry, who makes her way to the ring to a round of boos. Brother Love then gives us the definition for peasant. It's defined as a woman with no class. Brother Love announces his next guest, Sapphire. Brother Love and Queen Sherry insult Sapphire's looks, her weight, her clothes. They call her a commoner because she is, of course, with the common man, Dusty Rhodes. Eventually, Sapphire's had enough, grabs the mic from Brother Love. Brother Love gets pissed, and then the Macho King, Randy Savage, makes his way to the ring. Dusty Rhodes makes a beeline from the back. Macho King cuts him off. Sapphire jumps on the back of Macho King. Brother Love attacks Sapphire by pulling her hair, which you would not see in 2024. Brother Love's in the ring talking trash to Dusty. Dusty confronts him and, of course, grabs Brother Love. Huge reaction. Then Dusty and Sapphire dance in the ring to the delight of many. Hacksaw Jim Duggan is backstage with Sean Mooney and can't seem to say the word approach.
I don't have to approach anything any differently.
We are ready for the Big Boss Man versus Hacksaw. 1 second into the match, Boss Man has already sweated through his shirt. Hacksaw's on top of Boss Man early. There's some brawling on the floor, and eventually, Boss Man cuts off Duggan with an Inzi. Very impressive. I often forget how agile a young Boss Man could be for a man his size. There's a little bit of heat. Maybe the heat went on a little bit too long. At one point, Boss Man surprisingly goes to the top rope and tries for a splash that, while he missed it, looked like if he would have hit Duggan, he would have actually murdered him on pay-per-view. So
Day after day, seems like I push against the...
Slick jumps back up on the apron to distract the ref as Boss Man uses the nightstick. The ref manages to see Boss Man use the nightstick, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan wins by disqualification. Hacksaw uses a 2x4 to take out Boss Man and run off Slick. This match was just okay. It was just kind of there for me. I didn't like that it ended in a DQ. I'll give this match 3 out of 10. Not great. It's not good that these ratings just keep going down as the show progresses. I don't think it's a bad show, but maybe that's the nostalgia in me. Do not recommend Boss Man and Hacksaw. Before the Rumble match itself, we get a bunch of comments from some of the participants in the Royal Rumble. Right off the bat, we see Earthquake, who I love, with Dino Bravo, who I literally hate. Probably my least favorite wrestler of all time. I'm not kidding. I hate everything about him. His stupid cape. I'm sorry to the family of Dino Bravo. Then we see one of my all-time favorites, Rick the Mono Martel here, says that his face will remain untouched in the Rumble. Tito is just screaming into the camera.
I've got a lot of friends in the WWF, but once I hit the ring, friendship is over. I'm coming, I'm going to hit it hard, and I don't care who it is. If I get in my way, I'm going to do my best to throw him out. Tito Santana coming out a winner. Arriba!
What's happening in your life, Tito, that you're getting in your own way? Perhaps maybe you need to talk some more about this. I mean, that's definitely going to prevent him from winning the match. Warrior appears on the screen to ramble about 28 other normal men, but then that one abnormal man that he's aiming for, the one with a force field around him, much like the Warrior. Hulk Hogan. That's Hulkkogan. Literally thought his name was Hulk Hogan. Am I the only one? I can't be. And I feel like Ultimate Warrior is responsible for that. We cut to ringside, and the Fink announces the rules for the Royal Rumble. Interestingly enough, the Fink does not specify that both feet must hit the floor. Now I have to go look back to see what year they specifically started saying that. I'm going to guess that it was 1995. If you know it off the top of your head, comment below. What year did they start saying both feet must touch the floor? Before we talk about the Royal Rumble match itself, make sure you take a second to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. Creates visibility for the podcast, and I can keep making content like this because more people are seeing it. The number one entrant is, of course, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. The second, Coco Beware, the Birdman. Very quickly, Ted DiBiase disposes of Coco by throwing him with a backdrop over the top rope. Marty Jannetty is the next entrant into the Royal Rumble. Marty comes out the theme music. This is followed by Jake the Snake Roberts making his way to the ring. Also with theme music, no other theme songs play throughout this Rumble. Jake and Ted are kind of setting up their confrontation for WrestleMania 6, which arguably gives us the best Jake the Snake Roberts promo of all time. Macho King enters next. Him and DiBiase start double teaming Jake. That is until Rowdy Roddy Piper makes his way into the Royal Rumble and breaks up that. For fun, going forward, if you're watching this match, keep track of how many times Roddy Piper does an eye rake. In fact, keep track of how many times anybody does an eye rake in this match. Most of these guys are in Battle Royal mode, and so many of the cutoffs are going to involve a good old rake or poke to the eyes. Nice little drinking game for you. I don't drink, but if that's your thing, you will pass out.
God damn it.
We get entrance from Warlord, Bret Hart, Bad News Brown. One point, Jake the Snake Roberts goes for a DDT on DiBiase, but Macho Man saves the day and eliminates him. Dusty Rhodes makes his way to the ring. Dusty eliminates Macho with a backdrop. Andre makes his way to the ring with Bobby Heenan. This would actually be Andre's last Royal Rumble appearance. He was advertised originally for the 91 Royal Rumble, but he never ended up making it. Andre immediately hip tosses Warlord out of the ring. Heenan and Fuji almost go at it at ringside. Cock-a-doodle-doo! Is that a good Red Rooster? I don't know. Who likes the Red Rooster? Piper eliminates Bad News. Bad News pulls out Piper. The two brawl around ringside. This is all to set up their match at WrestleMania 6, which...
Piper, you could show up at WrestleMania 6 wearing anything you want.
Demolition Axe makes his way to the ring. Red Rooster eliminated by Andre as Axe gets in. Axe and Dusty jump Andre the Giant the ropes. You know, sometimes when I watch a Royal Rumble, when they have these random pairings on one guy, I think to myself, what if these two were a tag team? And it got me thinking when I saw this. What if you got Demolition Axe, Demolition Smash, Demolition Dust? Because, you know, after you get hit with the axe and then crushed with the smash, you would then be left with nothing but dust. Come on, you know you like that. Haku enters the fray and gets on Axe. Demolition eliminates Andre with a double clothesline. This is helping to set up their tag match at WrestleMania 6. Of course, it's going to be the Colossal Connection against Demolition for the Tag Team Championships. Jimmy Snuka comes out, eliminates Akeem. Now, at this point, Smash ends up whipping off DiBiase, and before he hits a gut punch, he does a clap. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves as a wrestler. If you don't notice this as a fan, you will never unsee this now. Current wrestlers still do it on occasion, but it's very prevalent in like 80s and 90s wrestling. I don't know why it's done. If there are older wrestlers that can explain this to me, I would love to hear the origin. But why is it that sometimes guys will just clap and throw something? It's like a nervous tick that is just unnecessary and phony. I hate it. Dino Bravo, yuck, entering at number 18. At this point, I started laughing because there's literally 3 eye rakes back to back to back in one single shot. Earthquake enters. Immediately, he eliminates Dusty. Earthquake is eliminated by a bunch of guys. He's just too damn big. At this point, we get the Ultimate Warrior, who immediately eliminates Dino Bravo. Thank Christ. The Model and the Warrior line against Smash. For a brief moment, close your eyes and imagine a world where, instead of the Warrior being Warrior, Rick and Jim, the models. If I can go back in time, and there was one thing in life I could change, Warrior finally eliminates DiBiase, lasting almost 45 minutes. You are doing yourself a disservice to not go and look back at the DiBiase run in this 1990 Royal Rumble. DiBiase is basically put up in the position of the guy who is really making many of the guys that are coming in look good, bumping and feeding and just making all of this just flow and make sense. The Hulkster makes his way to the ring. For some reason, the babyface Snuka goes right for him, but that gets him eliminated. Haku gets booted out. Warrior eliminates Tito. Shawn Michaels comes in the ring, but he doesn't last long. Hogan eliminates Honky. Warrior eliminates both Model and Shawn. And then, this is the first true Royal Rumble moment. The 2 biggest stars in the company, for the first time, kissing.
I'm gonna get off by cranking your knob.
F it. Man, that was awesome. This is really great.
For the first time, face to face. The 2 lock eyes from across the ring, and the crowd loses it. Without question, the biggest pop of the night. The fans couldn't believe their eyes. Who do you get behind? The WWF apparently did this as a test to see if they could have potential with Hogan versus Warrior in the main event of WrestleMania 6. The guys size each other up, hitting a couple shoulder blocks on one another, but nobody moves. Eventually, the two do the infamous crisscross. The crowd is on their feet. They're going ballistic. In that moment, Vince McMahon knew what his WrestleMania main event was going to be. As the timer ticks down and the Barbarian comes into the ring. The Barbarian. I'm not going to say anything bad about Barb. I've been on shows with Barb. He's a great guy, but as a kid, come on. Next in is Rick Rude, who doesn't even wait for the 10-second countdown clock. Rude and Barbarian are trying to eliminate Warrior. Hogan comes from behind, double clotheslines, and Warrior falls out. Warrior comes back in and attacks Rude and Barbarian, but not Hogan, even though Hogan could be to blame for this, and just runs off into the night. Hercules makes his way to the ring, and then of course we get the Perfect 30, Mr. Perfect that is. Mr. Perfect goes right for Hulk Hogan. Our final four is Rick Rude, Hercules, Mr. Perfect, and Hulk Hogan. The final four wasn't really established as a good final four at that point. Like, it's not a bad final four, but Hercules just seems not fit for the final four. I feel like the final four really didn't become a thing in the Royal Rumble until in the 97 Rumble, because that set up the final four match the next month at In Your House. I've said final four a lot of times, and I'm going to move on now. Miscommunication between Rude and Perfect puts Hogan in control. Perfect pulls the rope down as Hogan whips Rude. It's now down to Mr. Perfect and the Hulkster brother. Mr. Perfect gives him some hammer blows to the back and a perfect plex. You know what happens next. Hulk begins to Hulk up, brother. But it's not your typical Hulk up. It's not just like the punches and the big boot in the leg. No. Cacao. And then hits him with a good old bump and feed. That's wrestling terminology for clotheslines, and he gets back up and just keeps clotheslining him down. 90 WWF Royal Rumble. The Immortal Hulk Hogan. Infamous shot shown after this of Hogan holding a giant custom-made banner in the crowd that says Hulkamania will live forever, which is actually a banner that fan years later gave to him and now hangs in the Hulk Hogan Beat Shop. Of course, we get Hulk Hogan posing at the end of the show before we go off air. Overall, this undercard is not memorable. I would say that the Rumble is worth watching for sure. If you wanted to watch the first match so you can laugh a little bit with the Bushwhackers and the Rougeaus brothers, and then just skip right to the Royal Rumble, I would be okay with that. The whole show, I would give this overall a 5 out of 10 rating. Ted DiBiase is the standout in the Rumble match itself. We get our first Royal Rumble moment with Hogan and Warrior, which kind of sets the standard for Royal Rumble moments going forward. And one can argue that, yes, Hulk Hogan probably didn't need to win this Royal Rumble. He was the WWF champion. And one could argue that Hulk Hogan winning that Royal Rumble in 1990 helped add credibility to the event, because the prior years we get Big John Studd, who doesn't really do anything in 1989, and Jim Duggan, he wins the Rumble in 88, but what did he do in 88? I think Hulk Hogan winning the Royal Rumble in 1990 made it seem like an event that really mattered at that point. 1990 is the first Rumble match that matters. The first good Royal Rumble match, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on the 1990 Royal Rumble? Would you have ranked it higher or lower? Do you think I was too hard on some of the matches? Do you think Hulk Hogan lent credibility to that Rumble match? Do you think Mr. Perfect should have won the match? That was a Scuttlebutt Online. Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you send me your hate tweets to @GregoryIron. You can also check me out on Instagram @Gregory_Iron. Make sure you follow the podcast. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/IronWrestling. You can get involved in the podcast and the YouTube videos. You can get these videos before anybody else. And make sure you click below so you can see some of our archived videos. Please don't unsubscribe because I'm making Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan Kiss.